Guys, welcome to a classic movie review of 1965's The Cincinnati Kid, starring Steve McQueen, Edward G. Robinson, Karl Malden and Ann-Margret. Now, this was directed by Norman Jewison, and it's the Depression-era set tale of an up-and-coming poker player who tries to prove himself in a high-stakes match against a long-time master of the game. The Cincinnati Kid is a classic 60s film that effortlessly combines a sharp poker drama with a gripping character study, all set within the smoky backrooms of 1930s New Orleans. Now, this was adapted from Richard Jessup's 1963 novel of the same name, and this film has an outstanding cast, excellent period detail, and a soundtrack from Lalo Schifrin and Ray Charles. Now, I couldn't play a game of poker to save my life, never mind explain any of the rules here, but despite this, this remains for me one of the great dramas of the 1960s. Let's take a look. So The Cincinnati Kid for me is another one of those movies that I grew up to appreciate a little bit later in my movie viewing journey when I was a bit younger and working my way through the list of Steve McQueen movies, The Getaway, The Great Escape, The Thomas Crown Affair, Bullet. I didn't initially warm to this one, and I don't think it was because it essentially is about a game of poker. I mean, I love movies like 1974's California Split and 1973's The Sting. That's also one of my favourite films. Maybe it was because of the fact that it appears on the surface to be a remake of 1961's The Hustler, but swapping pool for poker, or maybe the fact that Sam Peckinpah was originally directing the film, filming in gritty black and white before being kicked off 2 weeks in and replaced with Norman Jewison in his first foray into serious dramatic filmmaking after he'd made a handful of rom-coms. I'm not sure. What I do know is that I love watching Steve McQueen's rise to a lead dramatic role with his trademark detached cool and some of the greatest character actors ever supporting him. Malden, Robinson, Joan Blondell, Rip Torn, all ply their trade here. And the Cincinnati Kid is an exploration of ambition, pride, and that timeless battle between the old guard and the new blood here taking place in the world of backroom high-stakes poker. And in this world, we have the story of Eric the Cincinnati Kid Stoner, played by Steve McQueen. He's a young, talented card player who's earned his reputation in the underground gambling world of New Orleans. His goal is simple, really, but all-consuming: to defeat the reigning king of poker, Lancey the Man Howard, played by the legend Edward G. Robinson, and prove himself as the best there is. Now, his friend and kind of manager is Karl Malden, as shooter, a down-on-his-luck kind of dude who is keen to get Stoner and legendary Lancey together in a card game in the hopes of winning big. Now, of course, if you've seen anything like this before, you know they're going to meet and that there's going to be a climactic winner-takes-all card game where McQueen will either emerge victorious as the man or concede defeat to the old master. Now, in amongst all of this, this is where some of the interesting drama lays, with McQueen's quite odd detached romance to blonde bombshell Christian, played by Tuesday Weld, who wants a bit of commitment from the poker star, but comes a distant second to his chase for glory. And speaking of the ladies, Karl Malden's Lady Melba is played by the glorious Ann-Margret in possibly her most iconic role outside of 1971's Carnal Knowledge. She's outrageous here and perfectly cast as the promiscuous femme fatale, constantly trying to lead Steve McQueen astray. And elsewhere in the cast, we have Rip Torn, who plays Slade, the conniving southern gentleman who's trying to rig the big game via threats and blackmail, and whose pleasure includes keeping a black mistress and having a shooting range in his man cave. Edward G. Robinson in the role of Lancey Howard is my favourite aspect of the Cincinnati Kid. Of course, known for his long career in crime dramas, Robinson brings a classic Hollywood sense of quiet authority here. He's playing a guy who's seen it all, and his performance shows both the weariness and dignity of a seasoned veteran who knows that the game has changed and that the new blood is coming, but is still more than confident in his own skills. He's unemotional and calm and capitalises on people's greed and weaknesses as he lays waste to their wallets. The central theme of McQueen being the young blood and Robinson being the seasoned veteran, echoing the actual movie business as New Hollywood was about to lay waste to the golden age of the studio system. Now, I'm not sure if I've mentioned before on this channel that I don't count myself among the biggest Steve McQueen fans. He's as cool as it gets, there's no doubt about that, and his screen presence alone makes most modern actors look dull as dishwater. McQueen himself was the first person to admit that he was better at walking than talking. And so a movie where you play a game that relies on you keeping your emotions in check and having a cool and stoic demeanour is perfect for him. I mean, Tuesday Weld's character even leaves to stay with her parents quite early on in the movie, which is good for McQueen's character's concentration, but also for us and the film's awkwardness because he's not the most natural romantic lead, I don't feel. It's much easier watching Ann-Margret's shark-like Melba trying to seduce him.
See anything you like? About the dance, I mean. Now, don't tell me Shooter's your oldest and best friend.
That's right.
So yeah, much like The Hustler was about pool, The Cincinnati Kid is much more than a simple card game film. At its core, it's about ambition, but it's also about the consequences of that ambition. Stoner's desire to be the best, his obsession with defeating Lancey Howard, leads him down a path where he risks not only his reputation, but his friendships, his relationship, and his own sense of self. And like many great sports movies, the film suggests that the pursuit of greatness often comes at a personal cost, and in the high-stakes world of poker, it comes at a high financial one also. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Norman Jewison took over directing after Peckinpah was pushed out, and this film was more of a springboard for him and an opportunity to make dramatic and serious movies. Of course, he'd go on to make In the Heat of the Night, The Thomas Crown Affair and Rollerball. Now, admittedly, poker is not the most cinematic of activities, but to be fair to him, Jewison does capture the intense atmosphere of the game of stud poker, using tight close-ups to emphasise the player's facial expressions and the stakes of each hand. Now, the cinematography by Philip H. Lathrop, who also worked on films like Point Blank and Hard Times, is mostly smoky, dimly lit rooms with groups of spectators moving ever closer to the table as the stakes and pressure rises. Now, for me, the film does a great job of maintaining a balance between the development of its characters and the poker game itself. It's not just about the mechanics of the game, but about what's at stake for each character emotionally. The dialogue is pretty sharp and laced with subtle humour, allowing all the characters to stand out a bit rather than just being mere players in a game. Now, I didn't mention classic Hollywood star Joan Blondell as the brilliantly named Ladyfingers. Now, Blondell was a prolific actress during the 30s and 40s, but millions of viewers will know her as the head waitress at the Frosty Palace in 1978's Grease, which was released a year before her death. Having Blondell and Robinson together here is a reunion, as the two starred together back in 1936's Bullets or Ballots. So The Cincinnati Kid stands as a classic of 1960s cinema. It's a film about poker, but also much more than that. It's a meditation on ambition and the price of success, or certainly the price of chasing success, to be more specific. The poker here simply acts as the metaphor for that chase, which is just as well as I've read several accounts of how the poker played here, certainly in the final throws of the game, is statistically unlikely to say the least. And although I won't spoil the ending, this has become the most discussed poker hand possibly in film history, for being so improbable that it ultimately undermines what is otherwise a fairly realistic portrayal of the game, I'd imagine. Now, author Anthony Holden's poker memoir, Big Deal, A Year as a Professional Poker Player, cites that the odds against a straight flush beating a full house in a two-handed game of 5-card stud are well over 300 billion to 1. It being estimated that if these two guys had played 50 hands of stud poker an hour for 5 days a week, the situation would have arisen once every 443 years. Only in the movies, but anyway, that aside, just focus on Steve McQueen delivering one of his finest performances and Edward G. Robinson providing a perfect foil as the seasoned veteran. The Cincinnati Kid is an exploration of generational rivalry, personal integrity and the consequences of ambition. Its script is tightly wound, the performances are excellent across the board, and it remains one of the quintessential movies of the 1960s. Go check it out.
Like life, I guess. You're good, kid. But as long as I'm around, you're second best. You might as well learn to live with it.